Welcome one and all to the Stock Up Podcast, your one-stop shop for stocking up on the information you need to qualify for the Pro Tour. My name is Alex. I'm joined as always by Jacob Negro. Jacob, you had an exciting weekend. We had a Pro Tour Lorwyn Eclipsed. How did that go for you?
It went really well. I went 10-6, which is what I needed to keep playing for future Pro Tours. So
perfect. You always seem to manage it.
Yep, always seem to be qualified for the next one, sometimes two.
Very cool.
Yeah, so pretty excited for that. Yeah, it was a pretty fun weekend overall. Richmond is kind of an interesting city. I guess the last time I was there was for Pro Tour Throwing a Veldrain, where Oko was dominant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard there was a ton of snow and ice, and it's a little unusual for them, so it was rough.
Yeah, I'm certainly not that used to walking. You know, it looks like snow, but then you step on it, and you realize it's ice because it's snow that's melted a little bit and then it froze again. Yeah. So that top is just a pure layer of ice in the shape of snow. It's not actually snow.
Yeah, some states and countries, if you visit them during the winter, sometimes it can feel like not even very wintry because they take so good care of the sidewalks and the roads whenever there's a lot of snow. But some places just don't have the infrastructure set up.
I mostly did walking, a little bit in Uber, and I could not imagine driving there as someone that lives in New Mexico, where there's rarely snow, and even I don't know if there's ever really been ice. So in Albuquerque at least. So.
Yeah, totally. So for this Pro Tour, you tested with a team, and from what I understand, it's it was kind of the birth of the team that you guys are calling the Boulder. How'd that go?
So it went really great. So the concept behind this team is that we're a bunch of people that, for the most part, have tested a lot together before. So we're really well versed in each other's kind of habits and stuff. But we brought on some new people, some of which were kind of brand new to us generally. That our team leaders, Andrew and Alan, kind of interviewed first before we had them come on board just to kind of fill out the team. But a few others were people that maybe somebody on our team has at least worked with before a little bit, so they at least have an understanding of some of their testing processes and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. This is definitely, I would say, the leadership on my team is Andrew Ellenbogen and Alan Wu, both Pro Tour champions, and I think they've had off and on bouts of teaming together, and I'll say, teaming with them too, that I think they'll butt heads a lot, but in kind of a really productive and good way for the most part in the end. So even if things get kind of tense sometimes, we all understand we're teamers trying to find the best ways to play the game. And I think everyone agrees on that on the team. But super impressed with the team overall. We had a couple first-time Pro Tour players, and they were really impressive. And then on top of that, just I think our team, we were the best team at the Pro Tour basically, as far as our win percentage total, even with a negative draft win rate. So that kind of shows how good our constructed deck was.
Yeah, do you think there was a problem with your draft process, or that's just sort of how it shook out?
That's hard for me to say. I wasn't in the testing house. I was less involved. We'll get into kind of my tournament report in a second, but I went 3-3 in draft, and to be honest, not that I did everything perfectly, but I don't think I could have made any meaningfully different changes in the way I drafted or the way I played that could have really improved those results.
I mean, 3-3's totally fine, right?
Yeah, so I 1-2'd my first draft, and I think this is literally the least bad I've ever felt about 1-2ing a draft, which I'll get into in a bit, because it just seemed really hard to prevent that from happening.
Okay, cool. I imagine you guys are going to be sticking together as a team for the foreseeable future then, huh?
Yeah.
We've bounced around a bit over the last few Pro Tours, but...
also we came in with 15 of us, and I think 13 of us are qualified for the next Pro Tour still, which is pretty awesome.
Perfect.
So.
Yeah. Okay, well, why don't we talk about your standard deck? Hello, everyone. Before you go anywhere, I want to remind you that you can find us on YouTube or listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts, all for free. If you would like, the best way to support us is over on patreon.com/stockuppodcast. There you can get access to our Discord, see exclusive content like our brews and guides, and of course, ask us questions. At the moment, we just have one tier, priced at $1 per month. This won't be the price forever, so make sure to sign up in the near future if you enjoy listening to the podcast. And then, of course, as always, I'd like to share appreciation on behalf of Jacob and I for all of our viewers, all of our listeners, and especially for each and every one of our patrons. Really, we are very grateful. We started this podcast because we love talking about Magic, and we'll never take your support for granted. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of the podcast. Just to start things off and your testing process a little bit.
So, about a week before the Pro Tour, I played against the kind of general idea of this Is It Spellmentals deck, which is what me and my entire team played, by the way, all 15 of us. I played against it just on Arena Ladder, so obviously I didn't see their deck list, but, my opponent played Opt, Sleight of Hand, Burst Lightning, Winter Night Stories, the Elementals, and Sunderflock against me, roughly. And I was really impressed. I think I was playing a Temur Battlecry brew, so not the strongest deck, but I recognized that, it seemed like they could do their thing kind of consistently, and the creatures are really large. And so that got me thinking, and I built my own version of the deck that honestly was not too far off from this. The kind of things I didn't have, I'd say, in my first draft of this deck were Abandon Attachments, Spider Sense, and Glacial Dragon Hunt in the main deck. But probably almost everything else here was in my first draft, including even Hydro-Man in the sideboard. But basically, we played some matches to confirm this, and actually, one of the first kind of matchups we played to start was against Lessons, because the concern was a deck like this would be really bad against Lessons, and we came out positive against Lessons to start, though I think in reality this deck is maybe not very good against Lessons. But this deck is very good against the Badger Mole Cub decks. Sunderflock is a huge beating for them, but your deck's also just full of cheap interaction. I think specifically post-board with Pyroclasm involved and more cheap interaction that, you don't really need to even... Obviously, ideally, you're drawing Sunderflock. That's part of why the matchup's so good, but you can easily win games without Sunderflock. It's not the type of matchup where, you have this 4 of and you absolutely need to draw it no matter what to win. I won a game in round 8 of this tournament where I played 2 Hearth Elementals and interacted with my opponent a bunch and just hit them for 20.
It reminds me a bit of the Gurmag Angler decks back in Legacy and Modern back in the day.
Yeah.
You maybe, your interaction is more on the board rather than on the stack, but you're just sort of cantripping and then playing a giant thing.
Absolutely. There's no discard. I would say, the big thing about this deck, if you're used to other decks like maybe Grixis Death Shadow or the Pauper decks that have Tolarian Terror, is that this deck has 12 threats, plus the Winter Night Stories are a pretty good source of digging. And this deck does not really slow down or play 1 or maybe 2 guys and then protect them. This deck's much more about interacting on the first 3 turns of the game and cantripping, and then continuing to interact while playing 1 or even 2 guys every turn until the game's over, which is pretty fast. But it's not weird to just get 4 guys down pretty fast or things like that, which turns the corner incredibly quick. So we talked about in gameplay, because we all had to learn this deck, that this deck does not stabilize the game and take control of the game, right? It just is kind of a tempo deck that your creatures in a sense are like lava axes almost, where they just hit for such large chunks of damage, which is kind of interesting in the take on standard right now, because if you played a lot of Cub and Lessons, the general sentiment people were expressing is that life totals mattered less than ever in standard than they had for a long time. And I think this deck does a really good job of making the game actually about people's life totals, including your own. But Crab and Sunderflock are just so good at swinging a life total race dramatically in your favor that when you make the game about life totals, you're going to pull really far ahead with those cards.
Yeah, and with shock lands in standard too, you could easily imagine your opponent uses a few shock lands, and then between, your 4 copies of Burst Lightning and 5/5s, you only have to hit them 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, Burst Lightning is very clearly the correct kind of shock variant to play in this deck after you play it a bit. Not only is, burning your opponent out very real when you hit them for such large chunks of damage, but you also just want to make sure that you have a high density of castable spells. So even though I'm boarding out Burst Lightning in matchups where my opponent doesn't have small creatures, it's still nice to have the option to shock my opponent in the face in the first few turns of the game so I can get out a Crab or Hearth Elemental faster.
Yeah, makes sense. By the way, for our audio only listeners, you can find this deck over on magic.gg. The deck list for the Pro Tour are all listed there. As far as Sunderflock is like the big new card for this deck. Honestly, most of this deck could have existed before. You've got Sunderflock, you've got Spell Snare.
Steam Vents is a pretty big deal for this deck. This is a low land count deck, and it's almost mono blue. My mana base, has 2 Multiversal Passage, which is a nod to sometimes you need the red. But it's really awkward when you do have to name red with it, I'll say. It really can get in the way and sometimes feel like you don't get to tap it for mana anymore. This deck can play 2 Crabs on turn 4 or, play 3 cantrips into a Sunderflock on turn 5. So you really want all your lands to produce blue.
Sunderflock and Crab double blue.
Deal. Yeah.
Okay. Real quick, we'll jump over to the metagame of the tournament. So when you saw this, did this make you happy? I mean, we've got pretty much 30% of the field being Bajramol Cup decks.
More than that, actually. If you see Airbending, 6.5%, 5-color Rhythm, 2.9%, and there's a few others down the line, too. This was about a huge dream for us. On top of that, the night before this was revealed, so after deck submission, Team Heavy Play Rampant Growth posted some weird cryptic tweet about them buying Hearth Elementals and Eddy Merc Crabs, and we thought we were going to be playing mirrors, but they were just kind of joking. So apparently they had found, the similar kind of strategy, but didn't actually fire it off, and our team is 15 people, to be clear, so the entire 15 Izzet Spelementals players in the tournament is just our team, which also made us pretty happy, because we really, I'd say people like Andrew and Alan are not ones to register kind of unverified brews. So there's just a lot of high confidence that our team had a really strong deck. It wasn't like a pure follow the leader thing. It was everybody really felt like this was a good deck after really testing through a lot of matchups. The cup matchups are just, insanely favored, beyond kind of belief almost to what, you think matchups could be. I easily think we're above 70% to win the matches with the ways they were constructed, going into the tournament.
Yeah, it turns out Sunderflock is just a huge hammer against them. We saw some other decks having success, even a deck that made it into the top 8, utilizing Sunderflock in a more common elemental style build. But I imagine, between all your cheap burn spells and then Sunderflock, that's just a huge hammer against the Cub decks. There's not too much they can do about it.
Yeah, we actually expected a lot more airbending after the great results it had in Portland. And one kind of key factor about that matchup for our deck is that your creatures aren't very good to airbend, because the discounts that they have on them still apply. So if they airbend your Hearth Elemental or Eddy Merc Crab and you have 2 instants or sorceries in your graveyard, they just cost 0. And if they airbend Sunderflock and you have any elemental in your deck in play, it also costs 0. So they can't really stop you from pressuring them effectively, which is like a key kind of factor of the matchup.
Yeah, it makes sense. I will say, I guess the other interesting point about this metagame is the other category is pretty big. 30%?
Yeah, 30% is pretty big.
And then overall, if we jump over to the sort of how the tournament went win rate wise, unfortunately, I don't have the day 2 stats because Frank Carson hasn't shared it, and I'm kind of relying on him to see this cool graph. But you could get an example from the day 1 stats where basically all the green decks, and especially the Bajramol decks, got kind of destroyed. And Brews did really well. You all had the best constructed record for how many people played your deck at 73%, so that was pretty insane.
Yeah, you can see these confidence intervals there, and if you rank decks by the lower end of their confidence interval, you can see we're the highest. And yeah, I mean, our total win rate at the end, even counting a negative win ratio, is the highest among every team in the Pro Tour, and we had the full sample size because all 15 of us played all 16 rounds. So our sample size is actually the largest of all the teams as well.
Man, I haven't seen something like this in a long time since like the Channel Fireball heydays of playing. Everyone played the same deck.
Yeah,
Really
and
cool.
in the tournament, before people kind of saw our deck in action and saw the stats, people were skeptical that we only had good Cub matchups and bad other matchups. And while we're certainly not good against every deck in the field, I don't think our Jeskai control matchup is very good, even though I think actually in the data we came out ahead. Just our deck's a bunch of cheap interactive spells and cheap threats, and the threats are large and end the game quickly, and a lot of decks in the format are not prepared to deal with 5 toughness creatures. Especially with people attacking Cubs so much, shock-like cards are seeing a ton of play right now, and our deck is incredibly good against those types of cards. So just kind of the format at large, I think, even against other, we're pretty good against. Now, certainly, as other might shift towards being, decks that are more prepared for our deck, I don't expect these stats to remain so true. I don't think our deck is like truly broken in that way. But I certainly wasn't that scared to play against other. And in fact, I went 7-3, and I went 4-3 against non-Cub, non-Mirror matches during the tournament. So still a positive record against, kind of other decks.
Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise to me, right, that the shell around is just has been proven to be so good in standard for its interaction suite. You guys essentially are just playing a different sort of win condition in it, in a way, rather than the lessons package, which lessons actually did pretty good at this tournament too, even though that deck seemed oddly underrated or underrepresented for how good it had been in the past.
Yeah, I haven't paid attention. I'm curious what its stats were against the Cub decks, actually, because the impression people kind of had is that it was not very good against the Cub decks, which might have been true, and it still might have had such a great tournament,
Right. Yeah, I could see that. It's also funny to me.
It's a really strong deck, kind of fundamentally. That's definitely true, but the Cub decks certainly really honed themselves to be good in the Lessons matchup, and I think Wistfulness was extra scary. But it might have still just been, pretty good against the rest of the format.
Yeah, what I was going to say, one of the reasons Lessons might have done well is it's just such a strong deck against the other category.
Yeah.
It looks like in day one it did, okay, although this is a pretty small sample.
Yeah, less pilots than our deck even. And yeah, the other thing people pointed out that I'm confident is not very true is, there's other elementals decks in the format, and I think people just point at Sunderflock as being, like a liability in mirrors because it's not going to bounce anything. But our deck has the 2-mana Sunderflock, and their deck has like the 4 or 5-mana Sunderflock. So I really think their Sunderflocks are quite bad, and ours are quite good.
Yeah, it makes sense. I can't remember his name because I didn't know him, but I saw one of your teammates in the feature match against one of these more standard elementals decks. Yep. Yeah, and it did seem like a bad matchup for him. Though I'm not sure how you feel about that.
No, I don't know. I really think our deck's pretty good against the standard elementals deck, I guess I'll say.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I think the Crab is the best elemental in both players' decks by a lot.
That makes sense. It just seemed like they maybe were going over the top, and then they couldn't be slowed with Sunderflock.
Yeah. You have to maybe present some tools, and there's some changes I might make moving forward. Like, I think I might play or almost certainly I'm going to play a second Broadside Barrage in this deck moving forward, somewhere in the 75, stuff like that.
Just have a 5 damage spell. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Yeah, so going in, you like your constructed deck, and then going backwards a bit, we could talk about your limited experience, if you want to touch on your limited prep at all, or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I just did a lot of arena drafts, talked about my team stuff. I felt like the data on 17th Land was pretty horrible for this set. Just kind of hard to get anything useful from, because it kind of just tells you to be, playing one of the tribes and major supported archetypes, which is just not something you can get into every draft. It's good to know that like elves would be maybe really contested or things like that. So I felt pretty good going into the PT. I didn't have time to do that many single limbs. I went 0-1 drafting kind of off the data and thought I drafted horribly in my first single limb. And then I played 2 more, just trying to forget everything I knew and just focused on my strategy of basically drafting the strongest card in every pack for a very long time and not really think about much else, and then I went 3-0 and 2-1 right away.
So a couple things. One is I watched Jim Davis's recap video of his Pro Tour, and when they talked about limited, their takeaway was that pod drafting was much different than drafting on Arena.
Definitely.
That the decks were much worse and much less cohesive, and then in his opinion that also made the data less reliable.
Absolutely.
Which makes sense, and it kind of correlates with what you're saying. And then, from my own experience, this weekend I didn't play in the Pro Tour. I played in the Arena Direct, and I did better than usual.
Okay.
And that could be variance, but one of the things that I did this time around is I didn't look at the data at all.
Yeah.
Just sort of coincidentally, I decided not to see what would happen. And then when I, towards the end, I started looking at the data a little bit, and it surprised me a bit. And I think sealed might be similar in that it's a little different than drafting as well. It's maybe more similar in a way to pod drafting, where the decks are scrappier and not as cohesive and that sort of thing. So that has definitely been my experience with this format, where it plays out pretty differently depending on which mode or which type of thing you're doing with it. So cool. Day one, did the draft go well?
So to start the Pro Tour in day one, I was in the featured pod because I was in the pod with Seth Manfield, and they like featuring, whoever won the last major event, and he had just won Worlds. And I was to his left. If you happen to watch his draft, the cards he's passing in packs 1 and 3, he's passing directly to me. And my friend Colin messaged me in the middle of the draft and asked if I drafted blue-white, given what he saw Seth passing to me, which is correct. I did draft blue-white, splashing a little bit of green. I was not what I would consider a Merfolk deck or even really a Convoke deck at all. I was more of a Vivid deck. I started my draft with a pack 1, pick 1 Shine Striker, the 6-drop Vivid kind of Muldriftery card. And that really warped my draft from there. Seth passed me like Pyrrhic Strike into like a good white uncommon. Comically in that draft, he passed me Hollowed Fountain, which I took pick 4 of the whole draft, but not for greedy stamped card reasons, because I really just thought if it was like a blue-white tap land that it was the correct pick, because I already had kind of a blue bomb and like 2 solid white cards, and I figured I'm just going to play this blue card and splash the white cards at the very least by the end of this draft. And yeah, I think, I took Bree, the red-white giant rare, and an explosive prodigy kind of highly, and didn't really end up getting any fixing in this draft. So I kind of had 2 high red cards that didn't make my deck. So maybe that part could have gone better. I'm splashing green here for Brigid and the Pummeler, but also the 2 forests that ended up making this deck were useful for Glister Baron and Worry Farmers. Because they're kind of color intensive, but they're both fixed in that way by forest. Kind of weird. And yeah, as you kind of can see, I have 3 Prideful Feastlings, which is one of my favorite cards in the set, and I felt like kind of my game plan was just to kind of, interact a little early or gum up the board and then try to stabilize with Feastling with either the Thought-Weft Imbuer or Glister Baron. I have quite a lot of Kithkin. And just kind of stabilize with a big lifelinker kind of hit kind of thing. The Puka's Eye in this deck was actually really good. I have a ton of cards split across green, blue, white, and black, so I just named red every time, which not only made my Vivid cards a little bit better, but I had it online multiple times.
Okay, cool. Changeling aggro, huh? That's my thought when I first saw it. Is this something you're familiar with drafting? I mean, it's not,
yeah, it
normally
is.
When you think of blue-white, you think of like Merfolk, basically.
Drafting the Changelings really highly and using them to pay off in multiple kind of strategies, I think, is something I'm very, very much a fan of doing in this format.
Mm-hmm. So Prideful Feastling, even though it's just a 2-mana 2/3, it's quite flexible, being that it's black and white, so it's counts for Vivid, and then it also can fit in multiple types of decks, and it, of course, being a changeling means that it gets all the tribal synergies.
Yeah, I definitely wish, So I'd say like an issue that went wrong in this draft is that I didn't get very many like strong broken rares passed to me, And I guess all I would say is that like I'm kind of in a seat where I didn't get a lot of fixing, but I maybe would have prioritized it differently if I had gotten like, rares in pack 2 or something beyond just like I think I got the Brigid in pack 3 even. But just, I'm ready to like splash or just play really powerful cards regardless of synergy as they come into my hands in the middle of this draft, and I think that didn't happen as much as I would have liked it to.
Yeah, you just ended up with some like, solid rares lower on the curve. I guess you have the Dream Harvest. What do you during the feature draft? Seth passed this, and the commentators didn't seem to think it was a very good card. And I think it was Paul Cheon and Marshall Sutcliffe. So what do you think of Dream Harvest in this format?
I think it's a playable card. My deck's kind of slower, and I wanted top end. I got this in that pick. So this was pick 8 in pack 1. So I didn't really take it over anything too good. And it was very solid for me. This deck also plays kind of slower games, and I used it kind of as decking insurance to some extent, where if we're both getting kind of low on cards in deck, knowing I had this meant I was pretty confident that I was just not going to deck before my opponent was. Which came up. I did effectively deck my round 1 opponent.
Yeah, and is you talk about decking. What the speed of this format? Have you found it to be pretty slow, or?
Yeah, so that I was not very well versed in paper drafts going into this, and I've drafted a lot of decks that I think look very similar to this deck in practice. And I did not realize till I played the first 2 rounds of the Pro Tour that maybe that's a huge issue with the way I draft. So I went to time in round 1, and my opponent, Ha Pham, very kind. The board state was that he had just cracked Morkan's Eyes for 10 elves, but I had my Tam, 2 Prideful Feastlings, Thought Weft Imbuer, Glister Baron, all kind of at the ready, and I had more cards in deck than him. So I was attacking him for like 13 lifelink every turn, and if he trades off all these elves, then I have another Prideful Feastling ready to go. So I didn't even have to explain it to him. He conceded, even though we would have gotten a draw. So that was very nice of him.
Gotcha.
I believe I was 100% to win that game, and the result of that game would have been that I was at 100 life and he decks. But, that was kind of eye-opening. And then round 2 against Daniel, he 2-0'd me, and we had like 8 minutes left. So also 2 very slow games. And I don't feel like I was playing slowly. I don't think my opponents were playing slowly, but I kind of just realized my deck is playing towards drawing a significant portion of its library to actually close the game.
Yeah, that's been kind of my experience with this format, especially, I played Sealed over the weekend. I had multiple matches coming down to decking, and Dream Harvest is decent there, just, as a big expensive card, but also, yeah, it can come up that you deck your opponent. I even had crazy decks where my opponents were doing something more powerful than me in a sense, where they would like answer my rares and draw a lot of cards, but then they just couldn't really close the game if I just had a few removal spells for their rares or whatnot, and then they would just deck out. So pretty interesting format. Do you have a preference for what you're trying to draft when you sit down? Like maybe this didn't go the way you wanted exactly, but for day 2, do you have something in mind? Like you're trying to draft elves if you can, or?
I just want to draft the powerful rares and uncommons and make sure, especially even going into pack 2, that I'm pretty open to taking the ones that I open or get passed to me, and making sure I just don't give up like the opportunity to have some absolute bombs in my deck. And I'd say this deck did not have any of those like absolutely broken bombs.
Okay, so you're not too attached to any particular kindred or 2 decks. Okay, interesting. Okay, so did
definitely
you
like willing to get into them, and I've had some drafts where I certainly do, but yeah, it's not my priority.
It's harder to come together, anyways.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, I won round 1 that way. Round 2, I play against Daniel Goschel, Gul Dukat, on Magic Online and Arena. And to be clear, because it's a feature draft, kind of interestingly, they give us photocopies of our pools, but not our decks. So like when we sit down and register our pool, we call a judge and they go make a photocopy, and then we write down our deck list later. Because people could, send me what cards they saw on the stream or things, or what cards maybe Seth drafted. We just have kind of open pools to be able to look at. I think here on Melee, it's probably showing you the deck list actually registered for coverage. But, so I see that Daniel has Soul Immolation, which is, a mythic kind of broken Plague Winds type effect. And he's got a red-black deck with a lot of high toughness things to really well support it. So, yeah, I don't know. Both games kind of come down to just like me trying to, not overdevelop into Soul Immolation, but ultimately he cast it for like 3, wrath my whole board, hit me for a lot of damage, and then I couldn't really recover from it. And that just kind of happens 2 games in a row.
Yeah, there's really not much you can do about it. You don't have a lot of removal, and you don't have any counter spells or anything.
Yep, yeah, Wild Unraveling would have done wonders for me. I don't think I passed any in the draft, at least in spots where it's reasonable, but I do really like that cancel, just the cancel in this format. Regardless of like the Blight synergy, I just think this is a pretty good cancel format.
Do you play that card main deck sometimes? Do you mostly like it as a
I would have absolutely
card?
played it main deck if I had it in my pool.
Okay.
I think it would have been very good. Yeah, and then on next round, I play against Ian Robb, who I've teamed with before, known for top baiting his first 2 Pro Tours of Aether Drift and Final Fantasy. And he's kind of a slower Abzan deck that doesn't look that good, but he has a Curious Colossus, and it's kind of the same story. This goes to 3 games. He Curious Colossus me all 3 games. My deck, I think, can sometimes recover from that a little easier. I boarded in the 1-mana 1/2 Kithkin that you might have seen in my picture, a couple of them, over just some crappier 2-drops. Because I thought, first of all, he has 4 of the 3/1 elf. Second of all, it's a card that's kind of good against Curious Colossus, which is like a funny thing to think about, but I think you just have to get kind of creative when you think about how to beat that card. Because like they play it and then it becomes a 1/1 and I can like chump block their 7/7 with it and then get another 1/1 later and chump block again, and that's kind of the play patterns you're going to have to do to beat a Colossus, is like figure out how I can redevelop to the board without taking too much damage. So that was kind of effective, but ultimately I still lost.
What a crazy card. That's it. That's the 7-mana 7/7 that when I first read it, I'm just like, okay, it ETBs and your opponent's creatures are all 1/1s, but then if you kill it, you get out from under it. But that's just not how it works. It's just every creature that plays it essentially just kills. Yeah, just turns into 1/1s.
Yeah,
no abilities.
So yeah, 1/2. Not that happy to be 1/2, but also I'm not that disappointed in how I drafted or played.
Yeah, fair enough. Pro Tour drafts are really, really hard.
Yeah, and like to be clear, I guess all I'll say is like my deck did not have very many bomb level cards like the ones I played against, but I also did not pass any cards of that quality at all in the draft, and I felt like I was in a position that had I opened them, they would have been in my deck. I didn't really feel like I messed up my draft, because really, the way I draft this format is really caring about the bombs.
Yeah, and when you're playing Magic, it's important to always realize where are the spots where you could have done better so you can improve, but also sometimes if you did everything right and you still lost, you want to be able to realize that too, because you don't want to be changing habits that are actually good habits on accident.
Yeah, and it's hard to say. Maybe I'm wrong about how to draft this format, but also the decks I lost to were kind of exactly the types of decks I could see myself drafting. So,
sure, but at least from your perspective, it's not like you're being dishonest to yourself. You're looking at it and evaluating and saying, well, I don't think I did anything wrong. This is just how it shook out. So I shouldn't change anything about myself in this moment. Yeah. So going on to Constructed, it looks like you play against Jim Davis round 1.
Yeah. So Jim Davis on Team CFB, or maybe now their Team TCG player, I think, playing Esper Pixie. So this list, it's open deck list, so I'm looking at it before we play and thinking about Kaido's probably pretty good against my deck, getting it down early, but he's kind of lacking removal. There's no momentum breaker in the 75, which is like got to be, not that they were expecting my deck at all, but if they could pick any card to redo the tournament with, I'm going to guess they're going to wish they had some amount of momentum breaker in their 75. But yeah, just some cheap little things. I get turn 3 Kaido'd. It kind of runs away at the game, letting him find the, few interactive spells, in that instant slot. Those 4 cards are all pretty good against me, the No More Lies and the Doom Blades. Also, just getting a critical mass of cards allowed him to play like Grim Bobble plus nowhere to run. to answer one of my guys once. And, the Kaido also, especially with a +1 at some point, can, like, stun 2 different things I play. And, I just take too much damage and die. Post-board, I think the matchup gets a lot better for me, even though, he has Soul Guide Lantern. I think my Pyroclasms are kind of excellent against him. I think I boarded in, like, an Annul, just things like the Broadside Barrage to answer Kaido. And, I think I kind of just do my thing. I forget one of the 2 games, I kind of just do my thing very well. And then one of the other games... and I saw Jim Davis do his tournament report too. He like plays out Riddler, draws 2 cards, plays some more cards, plays out 5 mana Riddler. I like end of turn bounce it, and then I like sleight of hand in one of my Pyroclasms and like Wrath a huge board that he has developed in the meantime. But I think he notably like cracked a map on a random flyer, and maybe if he cracked it on like he played a Tidebinder at the end of one of my turns just to pressure me. And I think, he might have been able to control a 4/3 Tidebinder that game and just kind of forgot to be playing around Pyroclasm that way.
Mm-hmm. That could have maybe made a difference.
Yeah, a bit more damage. Because, my deck kind of, once it turns the corner, turns it very fast. And, the Thunderflock, you might think it's awkward to bounce all these things that give him value, but he doesn't actually have that many things that matter for him to bounce, especially because, like, once he boards out, some of his Grim Baubles or nowhere to runs that aren't very effective, maybe all of them even, then he's mostly just bouncing Storm Chaser's talent, which is making otter tokens, which just get bounced by Thunderflock anyways. So it doesn't actually matter that much than bouncing all these things with ETB triggers, because he's just going to take the damage too fast. And he literally went through a Riddler two times against me or something and just got bounced multiple times and didn't really matter.
Yeah. This Pixie deck's interesting, right? It's a little bit of a blast from the past. It's surprising to me that their team, from what I understand, their team split between this and like a blue-black control deck.
Yeah, so the theory behind their deck, having talked to them about it, is the Grim Bauble nowhere to run bouncing of your stuff is going to be pretty good against the Cub decks. And they kind of, I think, expected the anti-Cub decks to be kind of slow decks that would maybe be really vulnerable to Kaido.
Yeah, like Jessica Control looked like it might be really popular, that sort of thing. Yeah, it makes sense. One of the stories of this tournament is that the bad guys, quote unquote, or all the old decks, established decks, kind of lost. And in a way, this is sort of one of them, even though it's, a bit of a sidestep because it wasn't as popular as the others.
Yeah, I don't know how their team did in the end.
So the 3 players that played blue-black control all did quite well. Like Matt Sperling went 8-2 with it, and Gab, I think, went 6-4, which was the worst, and Reed went 7-3. And then, from what I understand, their Pixie results were like pretty middling, similar to how Jim Davis did.
I know they also had some Cub players. I know Sam Pardee and Matt Nass played Cub decks.
Gotcha. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and I was thinking, I think Matt Nass was saying he wished he hadn't played Cub too. So
yeah,
but yeah, okay. So that is round
4.
So then you had round 5. Sean Goddard on Band Rhythm.
You're looking at Jim Davis's stuff.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, you got to
I'll go back to you. There we go.
Anthony Lee on Is It Prowess. So kind of another weird throwback deck. So game 1, I think I play really badly. I mess up a Glacial Dragon Hunt, and I think I discard a Thunderflock over a Spell Snare. And that cost me like the ability to turn 4 crab him, and I lose pretty much entirely because I didn't turn 4 crab into like Thunderflock. And he's just a lot, I just didn't give him the credit for being as fast as I thought he was. The Wild Ride's a huge amount of damage when it works, and he correctly decided to ignore playing around Burst Lightning because it's the only way he could win or whatever, or me having any kind of one-man instant, just, got in a bunch of damage, and then I didn't have anything to play on turn 4 that mattered really and died. Game 2, I kind of demonstrate that I think when my deck works, it just kind of lines up really well against this deck. And then game 3, I kind of went into it thinking maybe on the draw I should prepare my deck a little better to beat Ral, and I don't do that, and I get kind of soloed by Ral. So I think having played the matchup once, I think this is a very favorable matchup for my deck, to be honest, but I think I just kind of played bad and sideboarded bad. I think he boarded out all the...
It looks like it would be.
Yeah, I think he boarded out all the Slickshot show-offs even. I did board out all my Spell Snares. I figured I could deal with the show-offs with my various instants or crabs, or just leaving a Thunderflock on block. It's not like... Yeah, we could bounce a Thunderflock, but, still a lot of other things would have to align pretty well. But yeah, I think, like, Negate would be good in this matchup even, to counter Ral and stock up, or just anything really, because their deck's almost all non-creature spells anyways. Just stuff like that I didn't do. So yeah, I think, kind of my fault. My opponent, very good. Just capitalized on. I think he kind of guessed how the matchup would play out better than I did, playing it for the first time on both sides.
Interested in a bit to see how they did in the tournament. 9-7 looks like. Cool. Okay, so your record.
And, yeah, this was also the other deck from the team that won, Cosmos, I guess I'll say.
Okay, nice. So this has you at 2-3, and then you're going on to place Steve Stillman on Sultai Reanimator.
Yep. This is a matchup my team practiced a lot, and then the stats will show you it's pretty favorable for my deck. It's super weird. My opponent, I think, played it pretty well. He mostly just played like turn 5 and turn 6 Wistfulness, and just kind of killed my guys and used discard to kind of answer the right things. And I think he just did that both games, and kind of the game came down to like a hard cast Arden in game 2. I made it really awkward for him to be able to do the Bringer thing ever. So like Bringer didn't really matter. I think it came up eventually because it got brought back in Arden also, just kind of for free against me once. But yeah, I think I had a weird judgment call, I remember, where like in game 2, he had already hardcast the Arden. I Sunderflocked him, and my last card in hand was into the Floodmaw. And I had like 2 Hearth Elementals and a Crab in play, so 13 power, and he was at 14 life. And I had Winter Night Stories in my graveyard I could have harmonized. But he had 2 Wistfulness in play, and I was at less than 6 life, so they're both lethal. And like, if I hadn't drawn a Burst Lightning yet. This was game 1, okay, because I had Burst Lightning in my deck still. Or maybe I drawn 1 Burst Lightning, but I was pretty far into my deck, and I thought if I harmonize off this Thunderflock I just played and found Burst Lightning, it's lethal. But if I don't find Burst Lightning, I can almost like not attack at all. So because I had the into the Floodmaw, and I thought he was mostly just going to recast Arden, even though I also did bounce JED, to be clear, the Formidable Speaker. I just hit him for 8 with my 2 Hearth Elementals and left 2 5/5 back for his 2 6/5s, and thought he would just like tap out for Arden. I'd into the Floodmaw before combat, and then maybe next turn could 5 mana Winter Night Stories or something, or just find lethal pretty easily. He ends up untapping, playing JED, tutoring Deceit, and the JED discarded the Arden, and then he deceits my Floodmaw from my hand and plays Spider-Man on Arden and kills me. So I knew he had the Formidable Speaker and the Arden to discard to it. So he needs to have both Deceit or he needs to have either Deceit or Spider-Man and then tutor the other one. So maybe that was too vulnerable. But yeah, ultimately I would have drawn the Burst Lightning. I looked, so I would have had lethal if I played it differently. But
you're not supposed to look.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if that was correct because I had the bounce spell and felt kind of safe.
Right. That was game. Okay,
that was game 1. Game 2.
Game 1, yeah.
I know I also just kind of got hit by Wistfulness a bit too much, and then my life total was just too low to like pressure him properly, and I just let him have too much control.
This deck was also quite popular. It was like 10% of the field.
Yep, and a huge underperformer.
Yeah, huge underperformer. Formidable Speaker being the big card here, and that's what you were referring to when you were saying JED.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I just don't think this deck is good against the Cub decks. We tested this matchup a bit, and
it's just not fast enough.
Yeah, and I just think it's pretty vulnerable to the Cub deck's graveyard hates. They really need to do the Bringer thing to stop the Cub deck from doing what they want to do.
Yeah, they're not going to stop them with 6 removal spells or whatever. Yeah. It's interesting because a Deceit Superior Spider-Man deck did end up doing quite well in this tournament. We get to that later, but
yep.
Yeah. Okay, so on to your next round.
Yeah, so I'm 2-4 now, and I'm really hoping to play against Cub decks, and I play against Jesse Hampton on a Cub deck. And it's kind of funny. I mold a 6, keep a 1-lander on the play with Opt that I'm pretty confident is a keep, but I miss my second land drop for 1, if not 2 turns, and kind of just die. I remember I had 2 spell snares too, so I'm like even answer some of his early things, but he just ends up turn 4 playing that 1 of Ouroboros, and then turn 5 Mockingbirding it, and I just die to that. And then do my sideboarding. Game 2, I keep a 7 on the play that has 1 land and sleight of hand, but it's also just very good. It has like Crab, Sunderflock, Burst Lightning. The land I think is a dual land. It has a Spell Snare maybe too. Just like perfect interaction, trying to curve into the thing. And, I keep it, and I'm pretty confident I'm supposed to keep it, but also in the back of my mind, I think like this might be, the end of my tournament. I'm 2-4 and might just lose this game the same way. And then I cast Sleight of Hand on turn 1, hit a land, and my draw step's also a land, and I feel incredibly set up to win that game pretty easily. And then game 3, I also just win pretty easily. It's a pretty like disastrous matchup for this type of deck.
Mm-hmm. Boy, that's always scary. I've played a decent amount of these Izzet decks in different formats that all have really low land counts, and you're just sort of just priced into keeping hands with very few lands, but because you have cantrips, and you just hope it works out. Okay, so you good matchup. You draw okay. You win this one.
Yep. So now it's funny because I'm talking with my team, and I realize the person I'm staying with, Dan Weiser, on my team, is also 3-4, and me and him are the only 2 people who haven't locked up day 2 yet on our team.
Okay, so at this point, the team's doing really well.
Yeah. We even had somebody on our team go 0-3 in draft and then 5-0 constructed, stuff like that. He went 9-1 in constructed in the end of the tournament.
Nice. Did you feel some degree of responsibility since you had such a heavy hand in your guys' deck choice?
Yeah, no, my team was super happy with me too. I mean, certainly I don't think we would have played this deck if I didn't kind of push for it a little bit. And I had to get lucky and pair into it on Arena to even think about it. When I brought it up, some of my team said they had goldfish something like that, and something I had mentioned, my first draft of the deck did not contain Storm Chaser's Talent plus Boomerang Basics, which is kind of a classic spells deck combo to put in your deck. And I just kind of assumed from the get-go that it would not be good, and I think I've been proven right. You just really need... I think the best term to use is that Hearth Elemental and Eddie Crab have affinity for spells in graveyard, and you just really need to respect that in deck building.
Man, last week or even maybe like 2 weeks ago, I heard of several people bring up that Sunderflock, 4 Hearth Elemental, 4 Eddie Crab might be pretty good, but then they just dismissed it without even trying it. From what I understand, this was Jerry T and Matt Nass.
Yeah.
Separately, so that's interesting that you guys put together and tried it and works out. So you've got another Simic Rhythm deck.
Yeah, I'll add, and I was looking through and seeing if I knew afterwards, but that was a good time to mention it. This is the only person in this tournament who I didn't know, and I checked on MTG Elo Project, which is not like a Wizards official thing, but just a guy that tracks kind of all the matches and assigns a starting Elo to players, and then over time your Elo changes. And my average opponent's Elo in this tournament was in the high 1900s, which is the second highest event I've ever played, behind Pro Tour MH3, where I started 9-0. So that's saying something, because I think going 2-4 to 10-6, my opponent's average Elo should not actually be that high, I'd say, on average.
Okay, so what you're saying is you don't normally know all the people at the Pro Tour, and you...
Yeah, I don't, I didn't play against a single first-time PT player or things like that. I think this whole Pro Tour, as far as I can tell, which is pretty rare.
So it was a more difficult than average Pro Tour, probably.
Just more experience. Yeah. That being said, this match, it's interesting because you get to look at your opponent's deck list as you're walking to your seat and stuff nowadays.
Okay. It's nice.
And this is a dream deck list for my deck to play against. He does no Graveyard Hate main deck. All of his Graveyard Hate is attached to creatures in the sideboard. There's not even a Soul Guide Lantern. Nothing really that scary. I know there's main deck Spider Sense, but I'll be honest, I don't think Spider Sense is very good against my deck. I think that's kind of from the mindset of not playing the matchup and thinking you hit the Sunderflock trigger and their House of Cards is kind of over. But my deck has its own Spider Senses and Spell Snares and Spell Pierce to fight over that myself. And it's also not that weird for me to I'm attacking your mana with Crab and my removal. So it's hard for you to leave that card up while still just deploying your cards at a reasonable rate. And lastly, like I said, not only am I good at protecting it with my own counter spells, but I also could just have 2 Sunderflocks or something, because they're so cheap.
And it has to matter that, you can't still beat them with just a removal plus a bunch of 5/5s.
Exactly. Yeah. So I actually don't think Spider Sense is very good in this matchup. And anyways, this is one of my easiest matches of the whole tournament. Things go really smoothly for me. My opponent gets their mana disruptive, curves up into a. I think I'm hitting him with Hearth Elemental. They warped Riddler. Yeah, I play Hearth Elemental on turn 3. Then they end up doing a turn with some mana where they warp Riddler and they draw 2 cards. So they have 3 cards in hand, and they pass. And I go to my turn in my hands Thunderflock, Sleight of Hand, Spell Snare, Spider Sense, but I only have 3 mana in play, and the Thunderflock costs 3. And I remember thinking that I'm not that behind on board yet, and I don't need to jam my 3 mana Thunderflock into a Spider Sense that they maybe just drew off the Riddler. And so I Sleight of Hand, I find a land, which is exactly what I'm looking for. I play it untapped, hit them for 4, and pass with Spell Snare plus Spider Sense, which is just it's really hard to die versus this Cub deck if that's what I'm passing with. Because I could just the Spider Sense is actually really good at protect. Even though I boarded out in this matchup, part of why we played it main deck is because this deck is a bunch of triggers or Nature's Rhythms or things. It usually can protect yourself pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
They tap out from Raring River Regent. I counter the trigger, and then I untap and Thunderflock them with now Spell Snare for their thing on the way back down. Their Cub or whatever. And I think that game too, I just fired off a bounce spell on a land already on their Badgermole Cub, stuff like that.
Nice.
And then
Okay.
Game 2, kind of a. What did I have for Game 2? They meringued me to bounce my Hearth Elemental or something. But yeah, no, I just interact with them a bunch, play a Hearth Elemental, hit them for 4, next turn play another Hearth Elemental, interact with them a little bit more, hit them for 8, and they did 4 damage to themselves, and they tap out. Well, they leave up Gene Pollinator, they Meringue River Regent me, they bounce both my Hearth Elementals, and then I end step bounce off their Gene Pollinator, which is their only untapped mana, just so they can't have Spider Sense, and I untap and Burst Lightning them for 4.
Yeah, just how you drew it up.
Yep.
Pretty easy match there.
I called that a popper deck win, because I basically won with just all very simple cards, nothing fancy,
Yeah. So that locks up your day 2. So that's pretty nice. You had a sweat there.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
I finally got my Cub pairings. Those are my only 2 Cub matchups of the whole tournament, but they did play out as smoothly and as I kind of expected them to going into the tournament.
Yeah, and so, 4-4 doesn't sound like a super great record, but at the Pro Tour, there's a lot of rounds and not that many players, so 4-4 makes day 2.
Yeah, and I had the sense, a lot more confidence than usual, too, because I still felt like I had a good grasp on the draft format, and I still thought, especially with my entire team making day 2, which was mind-blowing to me, that I had a really broken standard deck. So,
yeah,
if there was ever a time to, go 6-2 or better on day 2, I thought I was in a really good position to do so.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I mean, I assume you go home, or you go to the hotel, get some rest. Anything notable happen?
No, not really. Pretty simple night. Yeah, so then next draft, and no offense to the players in my pod, but I do think this 4-4 pod I was much less scared of than my day 1 featured pod.
Well, your day 1 pod had a lot of heavy hitters in it.
Exactly.
Right?
It was a pretty abnormally strong pod, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in my draft, I open Champion of the Weird, which is one of my favorite cards in the set. Absolute bomb, in my opinion. And I've already had a lot of practice playing Champion of the Weird in decks that I wouldn't call dedicated Goblins decks. And as the pack goes on, I think I take a Cinder Strike. I get both Evolving Wilds and a Changeling Wayfinder, and then I pretty much draft mono black. And I remember telling myself I'm pretty happy with how this pack 1 went, because even though I have a Cinder Strike and a Champion of the Weird, I don't feel like I have to pigeonhole myself into being black-red, and I'm really going to leave myself available to opening maybe a bomb in another color and being able to play, that as my second color. And I open a Johnny, and I think, well, that's a bomb in another color. Kind of perfect. And then I get past the pack that has both Seer and Keep Out, and I think, Keep Out's just going to work so much better with the mana base I imagine myself having with a Johnny. So I take that Keep Out. I don't think it's that much worse than Seer. And then I get past High Perfect Morkant, which is interesting because that pack with the Keep Out and the Seer had Morkant's Eyes, and I thought I'd actually passed a decent amount of elf stuff to the person on my left, so they're clearly not elves. And I think, I might have already had the Furdot Core and the Wayfinder and the Evolving Wild, so I think I could maybe just splash the Morkant, and I want to take a bunch of changelings anyways. There might have been, I think I could have taken like another Changeling Wayfinder over it, was like the card competing with it, so nothing like that important. And then pick 4, I get Catharsis, which is kind of interesting because I'm already kind of a Mardu deck in my mind. So I kind of successfully kind of picked up these rares that I'd been thinking about. Notably from there, I mostly just draft black cards. And then in pack 3, I opened Kinbinding. So another white kind of bomb card.
Yeah, nice.
And if you notice, I've already said every white card in my deck. White was clearly not open this draft, but I still just kind of successfully draft such high, powerful white rares that I managed to make my deck work with them. You know, there's some key moments here too where like I have a Graveshifter, but in pack 3, I actually like pack 3 pick 2 or something. I take Cinder Strike over second Graveshifter because I just felt like I already had a lot of powerful top end. Just wanted the cheap removal spells, stuff like that. I think I get this Lewin in pack 3 that I'm kind of happy with. So I'm really happy with this deck just because it's a bunch of really bomby cards. And I feel like I actually, in gameplay, had a little bit more cohesion than it may look like because a lot of my, white bombs are kind of these token-y cards that actually play really well together.
I was going to mention that. It seems pretty cohesive to me. All your bombs played nice together. Champion of the Weird works nicely.
So yeah, I play against Aiden on kind of green-white Kithkin. And game 1, I kind of just solo him with Kinbinding, which is really like the only kind of really... I think I played Morkant into Kinbinding, but like the Morkant didn't do that much, but Blight won him once, but then the Kinbinding plus the attacks for 5 from the Morkant that already shrunk his board a little was just kind of hard for him to overcome. Then game 2... I think I like turn 4 or 5 Kinbinding him again, but he has like a disenchant for the Kinbinding. Maybe it was in play for 2 turns for 2 Kithkin. But as I'm like stabilizing through this game, I play the Ajani, and so I'm like taking up Ajani the whole game, and I think I had the Reaping Willow that game and the 3/7 Tree Folk as well, kind of being able to fend up block for my Ajani too effectively for him to get through, because he had like the 3/3 Trample Kithkin like in multiples. And I'm sitting there forever with like Keep Out in hand, but he has a Depth Water Shaper, but that's not working. And at some point I draw Lewin, and I play it, and I mill over both Champion of the Weird and Catharsis, and he literally goes like, oh no. And I think about my life total is like not actually good enough to maybe use the Champion of the Weird the way I want to take over the game, so I put the Catharsis on top of my deck. And then next turn I draw it, and I like count out my board, and it's like exactly lethal or something, but he has cards in hand, so I don't want to like risk it. And I figure eventually I'll draw lands and make worms with the Lewin. Next turn I draw a land, I pass, and then he untaps and plays Curious Colossus. But he makes like some attack on my Ajani first, hoping I like overcommit on the blocks. But I don't really even care about like ulting the Ajani. I just kind of make some like crappy blocks and let Ajani take some damage. Because his creatures are indestructible when they're tapped is why he made the attacks. And he Curious Colossus me, so now all my creatures are 1/1s, but I go to my turn and just like count out, or in response to the Colossus, I had made worms with Lewin, and then I go to my turn and just like count it out, and I'm just like he's at 28 from lifelink, and like I just have an attack for 30 extra damage after blocks with all my 1/1s getting +1/+1. So it was very long. Me being kind of patient because thinking there's just no way I could lose if I'm patient, and he had literally like the scariest card he could have for me being patient, but it still worked out.
I'm trying to figure out what your mana base probably was. I mean, so it sounds like you did Catharsis 4 red there. Did you play 2 mountains or you just play 1?
I played 2 mountains and 1 forest and 5 plains.
Gotcha. And the forest. Oh yeah, the Morkant.
The Morkant.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Makes sense.
Yep. So next game against Benson Madsen on Elves. Game 1, he does a lot of surveilling and self-mill stuff, and just like turn 6 convokes Bloodline Binding on me and returns like 8 creatures to overpower my Kinbinding really fast, and he doesn't even see very much of my deck.
Yikes.
So that was kind of crazy and scary. Game 2, I like play Furdok Core into Morkant into Champion of the Weird and just let him control no creatures the entire game and kill him pretty fast. Just make him blight his board away every single turn. And then game 3 was really funny. My teammate Matt was behind me watching, and I keep my opening hand, and it's like only swamps and like Morkant, and it looks like a hand that was going to go how game 2 went, where I was like probably going to play Changeling Wayfinder for Forest, play Morkant on 4 or something. You know, that's like what it was going to look like. And I draw Evolving Wilds on my first draw step and think I don't know what color I want from this yet, and my deck doesn't have that many 2-drops. So I don't play it on 1, even though I think maybe I'm supposed to play it and not crack it, but it's like this weird decision because if I play it and not crack it, it's maybe revealing about my hand. But I mostly just kind of autopilot and play Swamp. And then I draw a Ajani, and then, which doesn't even come down that fast, but it makes me fetch planes, and then like I draw, I don't remember the exact order of my draw steps, but I drew basically all the other rares in my deck except Catharsis and some other really broken cards. Like I end up playing Champion of the Weird, bestowing the Grave Shifter, which means when I blight through my Champion of the Weird, I can get back the Grave Shifter and Grave Shifter back the Champion of the Weird. It's a totally brutal like loop that's hard for people to beat. And yeah. I get Ajani and Kin Binding in play by the end of that game. I'm just like trying to keep him off having a board every turn of the game so he can't convoke out the Bloodline Binding card. And then finally, like the turn before I have lethal, he has 7 lands going into his turn with 1 card in hand, so I'm hoping he doesn't draw a land to like play this Bloodline Binding I've kind of assumed that he's just going to have. And he tells me I just bottomed it with Eclipsed Elf last turn. I don't even have it.
No.
And he dies. But anyways, I'd mentioned at the start of that story that my opening hand had Morkant in it. I won the game with the Morkant in my hand. That's how powerful my draw steps were. Like,
wild.
Didn't even need it.
I mean, this deck, the power level of this deck is really high, especially compared to your last one.
Yeah.
That's what some of the rares in this format will do for you.
Yep. So then the last round, I'm a little scared. I'm against Nicholas, and he was to my left, and given he wasn't in Elves and white wasn't very open, and thinking about what I passed him, I'm like pretty sure he's just a straight blue-white Merfolk deck, which sounds kind of like my worst matchup for this deck because it's kind of just fast and tempo-y and might not really give me time to deploy my cards and let me kind of fix my mana with stuff like Furdok Core. And yeah, that's exactly what happens. He's specifically a very flying-heavy blue-white Merfolk deck. Game 2, he played the 1/3 Tributary Vaulter flyer, and then on turns 4 and 5 just played Flock Imposter, not bouncing anything, and just hit me in the air for large chunks of damage and killed me pretty fast. I kept a one-lander on the play on 6 in Game 2 that I didn't get there on, but it contained, it had Swamp, Furdok Core, Champion of the Weird, and another Changeling among it. So I just thought it was like a pretty clear path to just like, if I hit my land drops and play this Champion of the Weird, this card might solo him kind of hand.
Yeah. Yeah, that's rough. A lot of your defensive cards here are like, you know, your wretched wretches. Yeah, your 4/2 to like block some stuff, or your big trees to hold down the ground.
Yeah, very weak to flyers.
You're pretty weak to flyers. Yeah, not a ton of removal. Makes sense. Okay, so that's a 2/1 with this deck then, huh?
But yeah, you know, I think if I could have managed to dodge like the perfect Merfolk deck kind of thing in my draft pod, that this could have easily been like a 3-0. I think specific. You know, I played against Elves, Kithkin, and Merfolk ultimately with this deck, and kind of streamlined versions of all of them, I'd say. So, kind of still impressive and showcases kind of the power of my drafting, you know, which like obviously requires opening rares, but the point is like, if I just drafted Goblins, I would have been passing Ajani and Ginbinding that draft.
Yeah, that's true.
So
worked out. So that deck was kind of like a 3-0 deck that went 2-1, which is funny because your last deck was kind of like, you could argue maybe a 2-1 deck that went 1-2 kind of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of what it is in this format. You know, I lost to Bombs the first draft and won with Bombs the second draft.
Yeah. Makes sense. Okay. So your record now is
6-5.
6-5. So you have to go 4-1. So that's not a terrible ask because you really like your deck, but it is tough.
Yep. So still hoping for cup matchups. So I play against Seth Manfield, current reigning world champion.
Yikes.
And he's on the Esper Pixie deck again. And this is not that different from the previous story. Game 1, I get Kaido'd, and I can kind of tell he Kaido's me after bouncing something, and then like after Surveils 2, and like I know he has like a Spyglass Siren or something in his hand that he could like play and crack the map. And he passes with 4 mana, and I just know I'm doomed. Because like it just to me screams that like he has multiple of these like 2 mana instants in his hand that are going to prevent me from even getting on the board. And yeah, that's kind of what happens. So he kind of runs me over game 1. Game 2 is like longer, and he like Soul Guide Lanterns me multiple times, but I keep drawing chaining cantrips to get out of it. And like I stick my board, and he gets kind of flooded, but I don't think it's like that flooded for how the game went on. It's probably like what's this deck, like 23 lands or something, and like I don't know. I feel like he drew like a third of his deck, and it was like 40% lands or something. Not that weird. But it went kind of long, and then once my deck kind of can start sticking things and chaining, like Winter Night Stories, it can obviously really pull ahead on gas and just make the game really threatening really fast. And then game 3, I kind of have this realization that, I'm like pretty scared of Kaido in this matchup, and I'm on the draw, and I remember thinking about it in game 2, because one kind of clear thing, I guess, about Kaido in this matchup too, I should point out, is it has like a window of being good. It's not good the whole game, because once I have like, if I get like 2 of my guys in play, then the Kaido's like instantly bad, It's the fact that like it can come down versus 0 or 1 of my creatures and kind of take over the game. But if I'm already ahead on board, which is just true of any deck against Kaido, it's pretty awful. It almost does nothing.
Yeah, I was going to say, this sounds like pretty standard experience with Kaido. Sometimes it's great and sometimes it's awful.
But anyways, I had the realization that maybe one of the better cards on my sideboard against this deck is my Hydromans. Which I didn't board in against Jim Davis, and I didn't even board in that game 2. And game 3 against Seth, he plays a Spyglass Siren. I don't know if I play a cantrip or nothing on 1. Next turn he cracks the map, I must have played like a sleight of hand to be tapped out, because he cracks the map and plays another sleight of hand, or plays another Spyglass Siren, hits me for 2, and I play Hydroman on turn 2. And he turn 3, like, I don't know if he didn't think about it long enough or he just had no options, but he attacks with both Sirens, ninjutsus in the Kaido, decides to surveil, but it didn't matter what he did. My hand had triple cantrip and burst lightning, and no matter like how he plays that turn, if he ninjutsus Kaido, I'm just going to kill it with Hydroman.
Sure.
So
basically just a cheap prowess creature.
Exactly, but one that can't be stunned even,
Kaido,
because it's not a creature on his turn.
Right, can't stun it, can't bounce it, I guess, if that matters with his sorcery basics.
Yeah, and he doesn't really want Nowhere to Run or Grimbauble in the matchup. I mean, Grimbauble doesn't kill it, but like he has to leave in some number of Nowhere to Run maybe if he wants to answer it without using one of his, Shoot the Sheriff or Get Lost that are kind of at a premium in the matchup anyways. And yeah, he kind of just gets soloed by Hydroman. Eventually I play my other things. My Hydroman, I guess, to be clear, in the sideboard of this deck is like, it's very, very good. And, I was thinking about it. I think the card itself is just really strong, but things like Steam Vents and Spell Snare are like huge improvements to that card. So it really hasn't had much time to shine, but I think it might be a major role player in Standard in these kind of blue-red decks now that they have these cards.
Yeah, do you like it still mostly out of the sideboard?
Yeah, no, it's the best threat like in my sideboard by a lot. It's just so cheap. When it doesn't die, it's hard to kill, first of all. It's immune to everything at sorcery speed. It's not, even though it's a 2/2, I think things like Lightning Helix and Nowhere to Run are pretty reliable at killing it, but that's not even that true. And shock effects are like not at all reliable to kill it, because if they have any blue instant, then like they're going to get to save it. And if they like play it on the turn that you're tapped out, then on your turn it's a land, which then means your next opportunity to kill it is their upkeep, where they have all their mana untapped again. It works as a land immediately. Basically, if it doesn't die, it's completely broken. It's like a 2/2 prowess on your turn and an untapped land on your opponent's turn, which is, it's basically the best of both worlds in one card. It's like a 2-for-1 in that sense.
Yeah, and it's both at the same time, right? You can attack and then it'll untap.
Yep, or you can it harmonizes Winter Night Stories sometimes for 1 or 2 mana when you just cast like 1 spell or 2 spells first, stuff like that. Very strong card.
When we both talked about that card, when we were going over the Spider-Man set, one of the things we disliked about it was that it was legendary, so it was kind of hard to play as a main deck plan. But I mean, it sounds kind of perfect as a 2 of in the sideboard.
Yeah, I could almost see 3 being good. One thing that's nice about this deck is being a Winter Night Stories deck is that you could kind of get around the legendary thing, because you just love having any creatures to discard to Winter Night Stories anyways. But
yeah, I could see trying 3.
Yeah. It's very strong. It's definitely the perfect threat. In the sideboard, we didn't test it too much, but Ashling is a card that maybe is like a juke for Graveyard Hate that helps you cast your elementals, but the huge issue with Ashling in this deck is it attacks for 1 damage, which is kind of just inconsequential and like not what your deck's about at all. So it doesn't really count as a threat, it's more of like an enchantment. And Hydro Man is definitely really threatening. Also, like that mana can be used for Crab too, so to some extent it also can help you, get out Crab faster if you've been Soul Guide Lantern and stuff like that. Also, it's an elemental, which doesn't really matter for the sake of discarding Sunderflock. I don't really expect you to be playing, like a 7-mana Sunderflock, but what it did matter for, including in that game, is that when I finally did Sunderflock him, it's still attacking that turn and not getting bounced.
That's nice. That's more synergy.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, so you beat the Pixie deck again. You beat Seth. It's got to feel pretty good beating Seth Manfield. I know you're a pretty experienced player yourself at this point, but
I have a really good record against Seth.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's great. So he probably knows who you are.
Yeah. No, I mean, I also just teamed with him, so yeah.
Sure. Perfect. Okay, cool. All right.
Kikahara.
13.
Yep, this is a Japanese player I recognize. They have a really cool hairdo all the time.
Nice.
Demir midrange. So this one, a little bit scarier. So they can do the Kaido thing like other decks. I think Flood Pit's Drowner is actually pretty good against my deck. And, if you see this removal suite, they have like Flood Pit's Drowner, they have Cecil, which is a 2/3 Death Touch, they have Tragic Trajectory, they have multiple Shoot the Sheriffs. So all of their interaction actually does kind of answer my guys.
Yeah. Did you guys test against this deck much?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I think we agree it's a hard matchup, but the mirror deck itself is not, that strong of a deck, so that helps. But I definitely think after the weekend that this is maybe not a very good matchup. Also, the sideboard has a card I didn't even think about going into this tournament, which is Strategic Betrayal, which is the one the black targeted player exiles a creature they control and their graveyard. Like the perfect sideboard card against my deck.
Yeah, I played your deck a little bit this week, either during or after the Pro Tour, and Strategic Betrayal. I got Strategic Betrayal, then I was like, whoa, that's really good.
Yep. It's kind of unfortunate that, like, thinking about it now, that Shoot the Sheriff can hit Hydro Man. That's kind of a huge flavor fail.
Shoot the Sheriff. Yeah, because
it's a non-outlaw creature, and his creature type is villain.
Yeah, he's definitely an outlaw, man.
It's kind of absurd. Didn't piece that together till now.
Did you point that out to your opponent? You're like, hey,
no,
man, this is a huge flavor fail. I don't think you should do this.
But yeah, anyways, I guess a suggestion I'd have for this matchup is you should board in the Annuls to hit the Graveyard Hate and the Enduring Curiosities. I would just board in both. But yeah, okay. I lost in 2. He actually had turn 1 Ghost Vacuum of game 2 that weirdly the Graveyard Hate aspect of it didn't matter that much because I kind of just sandbagged my cantrips and was able to outpace it, and then eventually I stuck some guys. But what mattered is when I was trying to turn the corner, he kept chump blocking my guys with Flood Pit's Drowner, and then eventually he Ghost Vacuumed his own Drowners, paid 6 mana to get 2 of them back and win the race.
That is the benefit to putting Ghost Vacuum in your deck. I mean, a lot of the time people just go for Soul Guide Lantern, but...
Yeah, we talked about it in our own deck, but a kind of issue with our deck is that we're going to see so many cards that, like, Soul Guide Lantern is so much more effective as Graveyard Hate on, like, turn 6 or whatever after you flash back Winter Night Stories and draw it or something, that we just felt like they had to be the land. But yeah, kind of scary matchup, but I could easily see winning it.
Okay, so now you're really on the ropes for your 10-6 finish, which I assume is your goal at this point. Does that matter for money at all, too, I imagine?
It's a decent chunk up in money, yeah.
But mostly you're trying to get that qualification. Yep. Okay.
So now I play against my teammate Phil, who I hung out with a lot over the weekends on the mirror. Phil only needed 8 wins this Pro Tour to get to get another invite to the next one. And he already has that at this point in the tournament, I think. No, he doesn't need 8. Sorry, he needs less than that. He just needed day 2. So he actually asked me if he's supposed to concede, and I tell him totally honestly that I don't think he should, and if the rules were swapped, I don't think I would. Because, these points matter a lot for Worlds or for future invites, and I have an example of at Pro Tour Aether Drift, I was 9-6. I played against someone playing their first Pro Tour. They didn't even ask me to concede. I won. I felt a little weird about it because I already had the invite locked up for the next one. At Pro Tour Final Fantasy, I went 9-7. At Pro Tour Edge of Eternities, I did not day 2. Because I won that match a year ago in Aether Drift, I was qualified for this Pro Tour I'm playing in right now.
Okay.
So, these wins matter. I don't think Phil, made any horrible misplays, but he also didn't play his heart out given the conversation we had before or whatever. And I drew more crabs game 1, and I drew both my Soul Guide Lanterns game 2. Those are kind of key features of the matchup.
Yeah.
We both asked how we sideboarded. We sided in the exact same cards, but like I boarded out my Spider Senses and he boarded out like his bounce spells.
Okay. So he's probably happy you won.
Yeah, he was.
In a way. Yeah.
It was awkward. Obviously if it's like the last round of the tournament, the concession conversation is a bit more appropriate. But the fact that even after beating Phil, I still have to go 2-0, I thought it was kind of ridiculous for him to want to, to concede in that spot.
Yeah, or you wouldn't want him to, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So wrapping it up. Hey, look, some more Esper Pixie. You're pretty good against that deck.
CCG flare on Esper Pixie. This time I don't lose game 1. I just successfully kind of get out from under Kaido by playing my creatures fast enough. And then game 2, I'll say the end of the story is after the game he thought his hand was perfect. He plays turn 1 Storm Chaser's Talent, turn 2 Pixie Talent. I Pyroclasm him. He untaps, plays Kieran Talent. I untap, play a cantrip, and double Burst Lightning his guys to not get ninjutsu'd. He plays a 4-mana Kaido, pluses it up to 5. I untap, I just tap 3 lands. He's already ready to be sad. I Broadside Barrage his Kaido with my 1 of Broadside Barrage at the time. And then I kind of just play the game, my normal way. It goes on a little bit longer than that. Game 1 was closer and kind of a tighter race where, interestingly enough, I got him to 1 with Hearth Elemental when he had like a 4/4 flying pixie that had just put me to 3 because of map tokens. And like I am playing to like harmonize Winter Night Stories, and I am drawing down to like 15 cards left in my deck, and I haven't drawn a single Burst Lightning yet. And I still don't find Burst Lightning, but I find Land Grab, and I tap the pixie in his upkeep, and that's how I win. But it's just kind of funny that like it was such a tight race with 4 Burst Lightning in the bottom quarter of my deck. But yeah, this one goes a lot smoother for me. Already a lot of practice in the matchup. I guess overall my team went 4-2 against this deck, so my team had a negative record, not counting my 3-0 against it.
Kind of carried, yeah. Funny. Okay. Last round.
Yep, so I play against Javier on the deck that won the entire Pro Tour, and also my second 2-time world champ opponent of the tournament.
Yeah. Wait, doesn't Javier top 8?
No.
Who am I?
Luis Salvato and
Luis Salvato. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
So Javier won Worlds with this Doomsday Excruciator card, notably when the win percentage of his deck after the tournament, counting the fact that he won the tournament, was like 34% or something.
Funny.
So he's obviously a fan of the Excruciator, and it won another tournament. I think his win rate was much better this time around.
Yeah, running it back.
Yeah, so after playing this matchup, I think it's quite good for me. Obviously,
really cool.
There's some scary things going on, and if they resolve Deadly Cover-Up, maybe they take too many threats out of your deck, but, it's a 5-mana sorcery. Game 1, I think I mostly just win off, kind of the fact that his deck has, like, Reckoning Hexes, and he drew 2 Harvester of Misery. He was, like, hard-casting Harvester of Misery and getting it tapped, and then I attack him for exactly lethal, and he discards another Harvest Misery to go to 2, but I have Burst Lightning. Game 2, I actually have some experience playing against this kind of discard suite because Alan on my team playing Sultai Reanimator loved just maxing out on all the discard spells, which this deck does too. Maybe not the full max, but 2 Intimidation Tactics main, Deceits, Spider-Man on Deceit, Duress is in the board, and Cruel Claws Heist.
It's usually a decent way to fight against Izzet decks with max discard.
Yeah, so my theory as a response is to board in all my cards that are threats and never mulligan.
Yeah, good plan.
And
I like it.
I keep a hand on the draw of 2 lands, Spider Sense, Hydroman, Flock, Hearth Elemental. So just very dense hand, looks kind of bad. He plays a top land. I play a land. He duresses me. He has to take Spider Sense. He's discovered I've drawn a crab. I play Hydroman. He plays Intimidation Tactics, takes Hearth Elemental, so he knows I have Crab, Flock in hand. But I proceed to just draw lands, like not cantrips into lands, just actual lands, and I'm hitting him for 2 every turn with Hydroman. And I think he misses his 3rd land drop, but then hits it again. And then, very weirdly, with 1 unknown card in my hands, but I should add, Javier is playing blisteringly fast, and not writing down my hand. And he could if, he wanted to. I would obviously I'm not like picking up my hand before I let him write it down. I just like go like, "You're good," and he's like, "Yeah," and I pick it up. Anyways, I pass with untapped Hydro Man and 4 lands with just the Spider Sense in my graveyard, and he knows I have Crab Flock, and he duresses me, and I drop my hand and grab the 1 Spell Snare in my hand and put it in my graveyard, which now means I can cast this Crab. And he taps out for Winter Night Stories, and I end of turn crab him. I draw Bounce Off for turn, and kind of realize, he could have Deadly Cover-Up, but these flocks aren't really going to get better, and I just play 2 Thunderflocks and hit him for 9 and pass with the Bounce Off up, and he dies. But
so he probably messed up.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of weird. I didn't realize till later, but I think that the rest was a little loose, yeah.
Yeah, maybe he was worried about... Well, obviously, I guess he was worried about finishing the match in time from his... since he
well, no, I mean, he just plays that fast.
Oh, that's just him.
Yeah. I won that match.
Okay.
So my day 1 round 8 match, I won in 14 minutes, and that match it was like 13 minutes. Yeah. Like...
Okay.
He's just lightning fast, but, doesn't always mean he's playing
perfectly. He's really good, but yeah, he slipped up. That's the cost of playing so fast, I guess. All right, well, cool, man. Congrats.
And I guess I'll add something that makes me think this matchup's kind of nice. I'm used to playing against these Spider-Man or Elementals decks with Deceits, where they have, like, Cavern of Souls. And I went to sideboard and just grabbed my 2 Get Out in my sideboard, and I'm like, wow, he is just going to play a 6-drop, and I'm going to have Counterspell for it. That's amazing.
Yeah,
and I've played against this deck on ladder a lot since then, and that just happens a lot. This deck not having Cavern of Souls, which it makes sense. I don't think they can afford it, but it's a huge deal in these blue decks' ability versus these decks, I think.
They could maybe change their deck around a little bit to have it, right? Like if they didn't have the Avarice, I don't know how important that is.
Yeah, maybe without the Avarice, but still, like you name any creature type, you can't play the Excruciator on 6 if you don't name Demon.
And then the Spider-Man too needs blue, black.
Yeah, even it's interesting because the Deceit Spider-Man thing is not very friendly towards Cavern anyways, and the Reanimator deck still does it. But like, if you need to, Cavern out Deceit on 2 just to have black or something, then you can't turn 4 get the blue, black Spider-Man.
Yeah, and the combo here is that Superior Spider-Man can come in as Deceit and get both the abilities because you can pay blue and black for it since it costs 2 blue black.
Yep, but you can't have Cavern Elemental and do that.
Right. Okay, so cool tournament. I assume you're happy with your result.
Yeah, no, I feel like I think really my match against Is It Prowess in round 5 against Anthony Lee is the one I really felt like I just threw away. But everything else I felt like, not that I played perfectly, but I think played pretty well.
I figured we could save, our general standard discussion probably for next week.
Yeah.
We could go over just to finish out this tournament, we could go over very briefly the decks that made top 8. So we had Marco Balaka on Jeskai Control, and this is a deck that's 4 Jeskai Revelations.
Just embrace
3 mana counters.
That if I'm going to win a Jeskai Revelation, I'm going to draw it. But
2 Rest in Peace. So very much, an anti-Cub deck in a way.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, and then I think it's pretty good against my deck too. The key cards in the matchup are the main deck Rest in Pieces and the Mistrise Villages for sure. Yeah,
he did lose to. He ended up losing, I think, to an Elemental deck in the top 8, and the fact that he was so little creature focused, that makes sense. Did you guys consider Jeskai at all? Did you
Not
like
really.
any control decks?
We played it as villains, but we just thought the deck was kind of too fundamentally clunky.
Yeah. What do you think about everyone still playing 4 Consult the Star Charts in their control decks, even though there's Spell Snares around?
Yeah, I think they just have to.
Uh-huh.
It's just like too good in the late game. Eventually you get to like 8 lands, and it's just the perfect card.
Yeah. I thought we might see like more meringues or something in its place, but some numbers. Christopher Larson made top 8 with the Excruciator deck.
Yeah, he won too. So congrats.
He wins the tournament. Do you know Chris at all?
Yeah, I've played against him a lot of times over the years. I mean, he's been around forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Congrats to Christopher Larson, and then we've got, I'm not going to pronounce this guy's name correctly, so if you want to try, sure. This is 5-color rhythm.
Yeah, I think his Magic Online name is like Zampa something. Let me find it. And people call him that.
Zampa, okay. I mean, his last name's probably Lupi.
Yeah.
So I was not surprised that some of these Cub decks, even though they did terrible overall, it's not surprised that one made top 8 because there's just so much of the field was this.
Yeah, and I'm sure he practiced and played his deck very well. He's on Handshake.
Yeah, anytime someone makes top 8 at a Pro Tour, they had to have played extremely well.
Yeah.
Tony Portolon.
Tony's been on a huge tear. He was almost Player of the Year last year.
Okay, nice. This deck was cool. Teamer Harmonizer.
Yeah, from the mind of CFT Sock, who I've mentioned before on Team Sanctum of All. This is a deck very much up their alley, where they just play infinite divinations and find a way to win in a way that is really hard to interact with or really effective, basically.
So it's like a landfall combo deck, but really you're just using Ice-Toe Explorer as the landfall engine and then Might Form Harmonizer to kill.
Yeah, it's also can win on turn 4.
Yeah, they've got full bore. You can give
warp, to be clear, like you can warp the Harmonizer, play Fabled Passage with the trigger on the stack of the Harmonizer, crack Fabled Passage, and then with the second trigger on the stack, full bore it, and attack for 28 trample haste.
Pretty nice.
So, pretty threatening. Just, it's a scary deck to play against. They've got some protection. It's kind of weird because it's a blue-red kind of twin-style deck in the instant slot you see over there, and then it's splashing green to execute his combo to some extent. And so I'd say, the mana base is kind of a clear flaw of this deck, but they have to play these weird kind of basics plus whatever they can get splits to make their mana work. Super good Consult the Star Charts deck too, obviously, with the mana acceleration. And then, watching the finals or whatever, Tony just like at multiple spots with like 9 lands in play. You imagine if he draws this card, he wins,
Yeah. We saw some pretty incredible things on camera with this deck. So,
yeah.
Ton of fun. I'm going to have to give this one a try on the ladder, I think. It's probably pretty hard to play, honestly.
Yeah, and then, there's this interaction slot that you need to play to like keep yourself alive to some extent that might change up.
Going forward. But yeah, you need some combination of like Sears, Burst Lightning, Thunder Magics, Spell Snare. Is it Elementals was a deck that did pretty good at the tournament?
Yeah.
Eduardo and Sajalik?
Yeah, Sajalik. Multiple PT top 8 player.
Yeah, another Sunderflock deck. This one just, runs all the Mythic Elementals with Flame Braider and Ashling.
Yeah, we had decks similar to this testing for the Pro Tour, and yeah, I mean, I think we thought this deck was favored against both Lessons and Cub decks going into the tournament. So, good place to be.
Yeah, that must mostly just because of wistfulness, huh?
For Lessons. Well, the deceits matter again. Like, the deceit is also like a way to vindicate their things, So it's like the combination of the two.
Right. Yeah, against Lessons, the secret is both being able to attack their graveyard and also being able to answer all their enchantments, with, the enchantments being the more important part. But...
Yeah, and I just noticed he has a main deck Pit of Offerings. That's a card that nobody has basically played at all until Vibrance came around.
Makes sense. Well, get yourself a little toolbox going.
Yeah, and, versus Lessons especially, it actually kind of taps for blue and red once you play it, so it's not even like the worst tap land ever.
And then we got Luis Salvato.
Yep.
More Demir Excruciator.
He's a super nice guy.
Yeah, he's also always doing really well. Yeah, so is this the only deck that doubles up in the top 8? I think so.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you categorize. I think there's another Cub deck, but it's not really the same.
Right. And then Francisco Sanchez on Is It Lessons? So Is It Lessons deck made top 8.
Yeah, so this is a no Storm Chasers talent Is It Lessons deck. So, like, I'll be honest, I think this is the type... I mean, this main deck Soul Guide Lantern's concerning, but this is the type of Is It Lessons deck that I kind of think maybe my deck is favored into, but then things like more Storm Chasers talents is a bit scarier.
Why is the Storm Chasers talent the problem? Don't you have lots of cheap removal?
Just like they pressure you pretty well with it, and then the pressure causes you to maybe not be able to just leave up your mana against them all the time, because you really want to like use a null and spell snare to like never shields down yourself against Artist Talent and Monument, I guess is what I'd say. But if they're hitting you for damage, you're just like not going to be able to get away with that.
I haven't extensively tested it, but just in playing Is It Lessons, for my RCQ, I played 2 talents, and I do like going down to less than 4, but I also tried a little bit of 0, and I felt like I missed it.
I mean, yeah, before I found Spelementals, I was playing a lot of Lessons, and I also had 2 talents.
Okay. So some numbers probably better than 0.
Yeah, I'm also pretty worried. I mean, obviously, top 8 of the tournament and Lessons is great, but like, this is just like not the number of gas cards I want in this deck, if that's kind of clear. I mean, I guess these 3 steps ahead are trying to kind of replicate that, so maybe it's a little closer than I think, but like, I think Lessons has like just a real problem of like sometimes you just draw a bunch of interaction, and maybe you even draw and accumulate wisdom, but it just doesn't draw you into anything besides more interaction, and you kind of just like don't do anything that matters in the game.
Right. Yeah, I mean, 3 steps ahead doesn't help that much. It's pretty much only good when you have Monument out.
Yeah.
And then finally, we've got
Airbending, right?
Cyprian Tron, yeah, on Bant Airbending. This is another Cub deck, yeah, but
pretty stock airbending list. I see. So people started making this move more recently, and I like it. You see, there's no Gene Pollinators, and there's just 24 lands and a 25th land in the sideboard.
Okay, so they cut them for land, basically, to make their mana better.
Yeah, and they can maybe even include like more Cavern of Souls in the 75. We see a 1-1 split, because they do just have this top end of Aang and Appa, both of which are allies. So it's not bad to just have like the occasional Cavern ally.
Yeah, this is another deck that performed pretty well, I think. It's interesting because this interdimensional web watch, since whatever RC it was that player won with, has become a staple. Seems to really improve the deck.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, well, one more deck I wanted to talk about just briefly. Show it. This deck was cool. This is the deck that the blue-black control deck that the TCG player team did pretty well with, Gab and Reed, and then I know their friend Edgar.
Yeah, Edgar Magalhaes won the PTQ on Saturday with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So pretty cool deck. Just tons of counter spells. Blue-black control, a surprisingly low amount of win conditions. Although in a way you can kind of win with Deadly Cover-Up and decking your opponent between that and Restless Reef, but. What did you think about this deck when you saw it?
Yeah, it looks pretty strong. I think one angle that makes a lot of sense to me is that the blue-white mana bases are horrible at casting Spell Snare.
Yeah.
And the blue-black mana base has a Verge that goes in the right direction. So if you believe Spell Snare is really good, which they did because they played 4, then building your mana base that way makes a lot of sense. And I think that deck made a lot of sense for the tournament. It's a control deck, so I think Standard is about to change really dramatically now after the results of this PT. So if you want to keep playing it, you probably have to change your deck a lot too. For example, I think Wan Chi Tong was really, all the green decks in this format just started fitting their deck with Formidable Speaker, and they already had Nature's Rhythm. There was just actually a ton of searching going on, and I thought Wan Chi Tong was about as well positioned as it ever has been at this event, and now that might just not be true again.
Yeah. The searching actually comes up. And then also, I think what's going on with Wan Chi Tong is it's actually a pretty strong card, and it doesn't like to play against decks that have a lot of shocks.
Yep.
It's a pretty, bad exchange. Even if you end up on cards, a lot of the value of the Wan Chi Tong is a big flyer, and if they just answer that with a 1-mana card,
I
birded great for you.
My friend Phil, the one I played against, he played against Nassif in day 1. But I only saw the end of his match when Nassif already had like a big Wan Chi Tong and a River Regent in play, which is not the stage of the game you want to be in as a Spelemental side when your opponent is the one with large creatures in play. But,
no. Okay, well that'll do it for this one, folks. Thank you all for watching. Congrats one last time, Jacob, for qualifying again for another Pro Tour.
Thanks.
And we'll see you all next week. Hello, everyone. Before you go anywhere, I want to remind you that you can find us on YouTube or listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts, all for free. If you would like, the best way to support us is over on patreon.com/StockUpPodcast. There you can get access to our Discord, see exclusive content like our brews and guides, and of course, ask us questions. At the moment, we just have one tier, priced at $1 per month. This won't be the price forever, so make sure to sign up in the near future if you enjoy listening to the podcast. And then, of course, as always, I'd like to share appreciation on behalf of Jacob and I for all of our viewers, all of our listeners, and especially for each and every one of our patrons. Really, we are very grateful. We started this podcast because we love talking about Magic, and we'll never take your support for granted. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of the podcast.
I've got some kind of fun PT stories.
Hit me.
Nothing, I guess, from the actual event, but on Saturday night after the Pro Tour and Sunday night after, just hanging out around the venue, some of us hung out at an Airbnb and just did like some team drafts and things like that. And I was up, rather late, like into the early morning on Saturday even. But I guess one kind of cool part of the story is I was at the Airbnb the first night, and Nathan Stoyer was looking for a deck to play in the PTQ on Sunday because he went 8-8 in the Pro Tour with the blue-red kind of Riddler deck, the one with Springleaf Drum and Splash Portal. And he was working on the Teamer Harmonizer deck, and I guess his team had been helping their teammate practice that matchup in top 8 of the Pro Tour, and they really just thought the Harmonizer deck wasn't that good.
Interesting.
Just, because it's really clunky and has bad mana.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was, told them, you can just use my deck. It's in my backpack. And I gave him a rundown and stuff like that. And I had him add a second Broadside Barrage. That's the first change I would make to this deck is finding room for a second Broadside Barrage. And anyways, Nathan didn't play against Cub a single time and still won the PTQ. So that was
wow.
cool.
Nice. That is a cool story.
Yeah.
Do you think your deck has legs going forward?
Yeah, I think so.
Into the format?
Yeah. I kind of think it's good against the two decks that were in the finals of the Pro Tour.
Okay. So
nice.
it's not like just an anti-Cub deck then. And I'm for what it's worth, Cub's still going to be a pretty big part of the metagame probably.
But there's certainly some scary things, like maybe if the deck that won the Pro Tour started putting that Strategic Betrayal card in their sideboard, I would be saying otherwise. Stuff like that.
Yeah. Did you fire any arena directs?
I did on Sunday morning or evening, and at the airport on Monday morning. But yeah, I didn't get any. I did 2 attempts and won nothing.
Yeah, you didn't have very much time.
Yeah. And then I also kind of a ridiculous team draft story. So me, Abe Corrigan, who works for Wizards, and Phil team drafted against 3 Handshake members, Carl Sarop, Simon Nielsen, and Arna Huschenbeth. And in this draft, in Pack 2, there's 6 of us, and we're halfway through passing around, and Simon just goes, "Oh, I did it again," and discovers that he never opened his second pack. We just were drafting 5 packs around the table.
What? He did it again?
Yeah, he said he did it again, which is a great thing to say. So the rule we have there is that we just finish drafting and then we finish drafting pack 2 and then just open his pack and pass it around extra.
Sure.
And then after the draft, my teammate Phil got a last pick Lava Leaper. And before the draft, I should add, Carl asked if we wanted to do Omniscience draft for the team draft instead of regular draft. So you draft like it's the Arena Omniscience draft where you have the emblem. And we didn't agree. Yeah.
Okay.
But then when Phil got a last pick Lava Leaper from his pack, Simon said, "I dare you to play that." And he said, "Only if you let me Omniscience draft it." And then when he played against Carl wanted him to play the Lava Leaper. And so they compromised on errataing the card to allow him to feel like it was strong enough to put in his deck. Which, to be clear, the deck he drafted was a double Doran, Abzan Trees deck, basically. And so they said it cost 2 generic mana, but he's not allowed to play it in the first 3 turns of the game. So Sarah Avenger.
Yeah.
And it's only a 2-drop with all the same text otherwise.
Was it good?
Game 2,
that makes it a lot better.
He played it and played Doran and played Nameless Inversion and one-shot him in one of the games. And then the other game, he was short of one-shotting him, and his opponent used it to play out a Tristan's Commands turn, and Carl had the Pendant in his deck, and that game was very close, but Phil got Tristan's command 4 times before it was over, and it was close the whole time. So, just a pretty interesting kind
Dude,
of.
I love the art on the Lava Leaper. I bet everyone does. I bet that's why it's so. Everyone's like, yeah, you gotta play that card. It's funny because you could imagine a constructed world where that'd be a good sideboard card. I mean, it'd be a really weird scenario where like your deck had a ton of basics and the field didn't play very many basics at all. But
Yeah, I think I almost thought about it in our deck. There's a lot of weird kind of elementals. I even had Nathan play a Sunspine Lynx in the sideboard of his PTQ, and in the finals, I don't know if it was really instrumental, but he played against kind of a Grixis Elementals deck, all non-basic lands, and in the final game, just like was already kind of ahead, but then just like played it and put his opponent played it as like his 4th giant monster, and it put his opponent to 1. And his opponent's like, well, all right, that's gonna get me.